Front center.
Your critics are always.
That's right. Yeah. Thought you guys would be heckling from the back, like the Muppets.
Not with Nancy.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Nancy Valentine-Stewart. I serve as the Executive Director here at the Kaddatz Galleries. I just wanted to thank Jon for making the time in your incredibly busy schedule this summer to have a show here. It's been on the books, but if you've been following his calendar, you'll realize that the projects are just going and going and going. I just want to acknowledge that tonight has been sponsored by Design Intent Architects. That is run by Scott DeMartelaire, just about a block down there. And through sponsorship, we're able to have our exhibitions as well as education scholarships to make sure that anyone who wants to take an art class is able to take an art class. That's for adults as well as youth. Yeah, without further ado, I'm going to let you hear Jon Kamrath because that's who you're here to see. So thank you for coming.
Thanks. Yeah, this is so awesome. It's fun getting to be here and see my stuff in here. And I wasn't 100% certain because, like, leading up to the show, things were really crazy with lots of distractions, family distractions. And so then, like, I ended up just kind of getting it all loaded and dropping it off and then not knowing. So, you know, then when you come back, and then thankfully they did an awesome job setting it all up. So let's see here. I guess to talk about the kind of the theme of the show was kind of the transition, maybe we'll say, or that I've been making lately in art, because I've either had these giant pieces, like the ones that are in here, this big red one and the bluish one, those are kind of the like smaller end of my big public pieces. They're generally really large. I like really big things and they're fun to make, but they're, so it'd be either these giant things or it'd be like these tiny houses, like some that are like this big, or, you know, the little houses. And so then those would go in galleries and those would sell good, but, and then, or these giant ones, but they're fun. They just didn't really have anything to do with each other. And then, yeah, and so then kind of when COVID hit, public sculpture really tanked for a lot of people, and so I've been doing like the bigger pieces. They go on these tours that cities will have where they for like a year a city will rent a piece for a few $1,000, and then you have a contract, and by the time that contract is up, you hopefully have lined up another city to bring it to. And so so then I had these pieces that had been out. Right now I think I got like 16 pieces out in 6 different states around the Midwest, which is pretty good. That's probably just a little bit over what is good for my family. And so well, because a couple of years ago I think I had 17, and my wife was like, "That is too many. We have to cut back." And so then I had cut back and it was better, but then this year, I don't know, it just like crept up again. And so then, but 16 we learned. 16 plus the show here, that's too much. That's what we learned. But anyways, my wife is amazing, and thankfully I'm still married. But anyways, as I was trying to figure out, like, what am I gonna, like, yeah, how does this work? And then COVID hit, so everything kind of shut down. All the pieces some cities wouldn't let you have the piece back. Then they're not making money because they're not part of under contract still. And so, wow, so it was just a big mess. But so then I started working on trying to figure out ways to like make some smaller things that could be a little more accessible for like people to have maybe in their garden or in their home. Because I think this is cool and this, but like, I don't know. It's hard for people like us to access this. It's more meant for public sculpture, right? And so they're public sculpture prices and they're public sculpture sizes, and so it's just hard to get access to that for regular people. And so then I started working on ones that are meant to be like this pedestal-sized one was somewhat of a like study for a bigger piece to see if it would work, but then when it is done, then it was like, oh, actually it works okay as a sculpture in itself. And so then I've been trying to make these pieces that are more pedestal sized because I could see, and that's on a pedestal that can like survive outside and everything. So then I've been trying to make more of them like that, not necessarily like that, but that size, so that they can start, so that people like us can get access to them. Because like my big stuff I think is cool. I love making big stuff, but like we can't have it at our house, obviously. Then this trees one is probably my newest. I've been trying to make some trees. I've been drawing in the sketchbook for years, and then as this show came up, I was like, oh, shit, I have to get this trees done. And so that's kind of the newer direction that I'm going, I think. I guess that's maybe the best way to put it. So, yeah. And same with then there's the pedestal-sized piece in the window that's kind of like airwaves. Those are my newest ones, is the ones that are more pedestal-sized, meant to go either inside. They could go in a house, or they could go in a garden, or they could go. Some of the cities will still rent these pieces too. They're like the small end of what they'll rent to, and actually they pay the same whether it's this size or whether it's giant. And so it's 1,000 times easier to haul this than it is to haul like a 700-pound sculpture. But then again, the big 700-pound sculptures look pretty sweet when they're up. So I don't know. It's tough. Yep. But I don't know. Can I answer questions? I'm better at answering questions than I am just.
So I know that you have a permanent installation on the campus of Bemidji State University.
Oh yeah.
I haven't had a chance to see that. You mentioned that this one is permanently. Yeah.
So this is in St. Paul. So well, I mean, this is the like practice or the maquette, the test version of it. The piece itself turned out 11 feet tall, which is, I think this is like 11-foot ceilings, right? Yeah. So it's like about here. My studio has 11-foot 2-inch ceilings, so I was able to make it inside as long as I was careful with the lights. But then that one, if anybody's familiar with the Twin Cities, it's at Como Lake. So that one is permanent, and the theme that the city was going for was of a feather, so it has to do with community building, and mine was one of 3 or 5 pieces fitting that theme along a bike path, and so when we say of a feather, like it's kind of intended to be like a tree with a nest with a bird. Bird, yeah. And so then when people ask, oh, you have a piece on around Como Lake, what is it? I'm like, it's a bird, kind of. It's just a cool sculpture. And then if somebody says it's a bird, then you go, oh yeah, so it is. Yeah.
Does it look more like the picture, or is it?
Yeah. So it ended up when we were in the design phase, like I had at one point tried some color I thought would be, actually my kid came up with the color, and but I thought it was awesome. So, but in the end, due to how it was going to like be outdoors for longevity, so it's made of Corten steel. So its finish, the rust is the finish, so it won't ever rust away. It just stays that. And then the top is aluminum, so it's all squiggle shiny like this. And so then with the big curves to it, as you walk around, it looks like electric, like lightning almost, kind of sizzling around it. So, but then that should be able to hold up and look like that. Should still look new, 10 or 50 years plus from now, whereas paint 50 years will not look new. So, yeah, so that's how it ended up, is in the picture. So, and I just got it I just installed it in the spring, and I actually haven't even documented it well yet. But if you're ever in the Twin Cities, check that out. So, or Bemidji State has, so around the corner there's like a maquette of a moose, but then that moose ended up being like 22 feet or something. So it's a pretty big moose up there. So, yeah.
Do you have other installations around?
So I have permanent pieces. I have a piece. Then I have a couple of pieces in Rochester, Minnesota. So my biggest piece, the thing that like got my foot in the door for public sculpture, was a 4.5 story piece for a church in Rochester. So it's like 45 feet tall. These 3 angels around a cross. It's for a church, and so. But the angels are all aluminum and squiggly like this aluminum too, and so that's kind of my first piece. And actually, like this piece of aluminum and that piece of aluminum on that one, so they were the scrap from that sculpture. And so when they did the laser cutting and then the drops from that, then I was like, what am I gonna do with these pieces, these extra pieces? And so then I came up with that as the practice one to see if it would work, and then it did. So I made some of these other pieces. But yeah, so if you're ever in Rochester on the northern, it's Hosanna Lutheran Church is the name of it, and on the northern end of Rochester, and you can see it like from the highway. It's like this big out your window, but in real life, I mean, when you get closer, it's 4.5 stories. And then there's a park in Rochester called Cascade Lake Park, and I have a piece there that's maybe 8 or 10 feet tall as well. I think that's it for my permanent ones. Oh, and Chicago has bought a few of my pieces. Oh, you know what? So I guess I have a few pieces. I take it back. So those are the only ones that were like built to be site specific. But then these, like when these kind are at the rotating public tours, sometimes cities will buy them. And so Mankato bought like this bird that's here. There's an 11-foot. Oops, it broke. Anyways, this bird here, like there's an 11-foot one like this in Mankato. Or in West Mankato, North Mankato, in Mankato. So yep. So so sometimes the cities will buy them, and then those end up permanent. So I probably maybe have 10-ish permanent pieces.
When you're doing these pieces, that 45-foot one, are you fabricating it yourself, transporting it yourself? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it's a lot of logistics. So most of them I do all by myself. I will say that the 45-foot one, I got to work with another sculptor who was great to work with. Dan Woolberg is his name, who was super helpful. So like there's a ton of logistics. It's super hard to build it. That specific one was fabricated in his studio. All the rest of these were then in my studio. So then takes the place we moved into now has 11-foot ceilings just like this, and I have a hoist for lifting heavy things to try and save my back so I could keep doing this for long term. Like for some of them I have to rent a truck to transport it, but for most of them I'll try and build them. 11-foot is a good number because that's the size of my studio, and my trailer is 12 feet. And so a lot of my maquettes are designed to be 11 feet tall. And so I had one piece for Bemidji that was like 14.6 or something, and I got it all fabricated outside in the garage, outside in the driveway, and then I had to put a finish on it and went to bring it inside. And this was at my previous studio, but I went to bring it inside, and inside I knew that my seat, the in between the trusses, was going to be like 14 something feet tall, but it ended up being 14.3. So we cut 3 inches off the top of it, and then fit it just right between the trusses, and then put a finish on it inside. But like, it's just a ton of logistics of how to make. And so and every time I even transport these ones to the different shows, it's a ton of logistics of how do you strap it down on the trailer, and I've kind of got a really great network of other sculpture friends who I'll travel with, and so together we'll try, if we know we're, say, going to Chicago, we'll try and line it up so all 4 of us are going to go to Chicago at the same time. But then we're all installing, we'll install maybe 7 sculptures in a couple of days, which is exhausting, but awesome too. But like how you Tetris all that in on the trailer and strap it all down and make sure it's safe, and sometimes the welds will break while you're driving, and I don't know. Another friend had so far, none of mine have broken while driving, but another friend had a bird break off of his, and we just got to our destination and there was no bird on it. And we're like, oh, I hope nobody got a bird through the window. But, so I don't know it's all, that's I've had to learn by keeping track of my hours that the logistics of loading it on the trailer is a huge part of it, and the logistics of moving it in and out of the garage. So when I'm coming up with the price, I try and keep good track of my hours so I can, but then especially for future estimates, but what I haven't been good at, or I'm getting better, is trying to remember that oh yeah, you have to budget in that there's a big significant cost in delivery and install. So, and with permanent pieces, I found too, the cement work is 20% of my overall budget, and you don't see any of it. Just the engineer says it has to be 1 million feet deep, and then they pour it all in there, and nobody ever sees it again, and then you write a check for 20%. Yeah. So, but that I don't mean to complain about it because I'm living the dream. So, yeah. But yeah.
The piece that's on the postcard that we all got.
Yeah.
What do you call it again?
That is called Here and Gone.
Here and Gone. Yes, I love it. That seems to be a departure from what you've done before.
It is.
Okay. Can you talk about?
I can, yes. So most of my stuff, when I would talk about subject matter, this one had a little bit of subject matter in that it's community and a bird, and this has a little bit of subject matter in that it's trees, but most of them is not necessarily. Mostly my subject matter is shape and color and form, right? So, and lines. But that piece I've been doing now for 3 years in a row. I've been doing there's a show in Red Wing, Minnesota that's a poem, what do they call it? Poet-artist collaboration. So the way it works is you apply to it as an artist, and then if you get in, then all these poets had already applied to, and so then you're assigned a poem, and you get to kind of pick, but you don't fully pick. But anyway, so the last 3 years, the poem that I've been assigned to was super emotionally hard to deal with, which is good because I lost because my best friend died, and so it hit really hard dealing with that. And so it is awesome because it pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And so that is one of the very few pieces that actually has an emotional meaning to me. And so that one, the way the poem went, talks about the poet's person the poet was writing about somebody looking down on them and them writing them a letter and it floating away on the wind. And so then that piece is kind of the wind moving and kind of taking, as I'm thinking about my friend who is now gone. So that piece is kind of the wind taking my thoughts away. So yeah, that is very different. It's super different, and it's one of the very few pieces that has emotional attachment to me.
How about the construction, if you don't mind?
Yeah, that's all right. No, that's fun. That's way easier to talk about. Yeah, yeah. So that's just bent aluminum. It's just all fabricated, all aluminum, and then with a not TIG welded, but wire feed, a MIG, but with a spool gun. And so then it's just all welded up together and then ground. Actually, I had my 13-year-old did a bunch of grinding on that to help me, and so yeah. Yeah, the twist ended up being very challenging, but it's first I made it all out of 1/4-inch rod, like which you often do, right? So I just made a frame out of the 1/4-inch rod, and then made pieces of paper. I sheeted it, I skinned it all in paper, and then traced that paper over aluminum and plasma cut it and welded on, and just spent bajillion hour, many spools of wire welding it together, and many hours grinding.
Did you roll the pieces?
Yeah, yep. Well, so if you look closely, no, not if you look close, it's pretty thick metal, and so I ended up doing a ton of micro bends in with a brake. So instead of, yeah. So if you look real close, you could be like, oh yeah, I see every 1/4 inch. Yeah, but then the squiggly grindy hides that from most people. But then again, the people who are good enough or who know enough and can see it, they appreciate it, and so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But most people will never notice, and that's not the point, so it's fine.
Any problem grinding the granite?
So the granite ended up being like almost a last minute thing of it was gonna have a big aluminum base, but then the deadline was too soon, or the deadline was set way in advance. I was too slow, and then I needed some sort of base in a short amount of time, and nowhere was open. And I had some boulders in my yard from the landscaping, and it was like 10 at night or whatever. So I was like, we'll try drilling in the granite, and it worked. And then, but then why that ended up sweet is because then I think of it, sorry not to get emotional again, but then I think of it as like me being that rock that's still left behind as my friend has moved on. And so it actually, the visual weight of it actually ended up working out quite nice. So, yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
What about your journey? In your last show here, you had a ton of little houses.
Yeah. So I haven't been doing I still am doing some of the little houses, but I haven't been doing a ton of them. They're really fun. They're fun to make, and they tend to sell, which is good. But then I don't know what my deal is, but I'm not very good at sticking with a thing. And so once I kind of like felt like I figured them out, I was like, oh, I got these. I like how these are. I figured it out. And then I'm on to a new thing I don't have figured out. And so so I've been making them. First, I've been just making them like this, but then I started putting them on the stilts, which I think I love them on the stilts. I think it's really cool, and it has more. It has some emotion has some connection to me there. But then, but that's way more work and sells worse because they're more expensive, and the price point that they're at, it's not a good business plan to make them that way. But then again, being a sculptor has never been a good business plan anyways. So I don't know. But so I haven't been making the houses a ton lately. And then I did make for right now it's in the city of Hopkins, but I made my first an outdoor one. So it's like 11 foot tall, surprise, and it's but it's an outdoor piece on. It's basically like this, except for with yellow legs and a blue house. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. It looks cool from a distance. It actually looks cool from up close too. But I'm not certain how long the house, because these are all clay, which I think makes them fun because they look like wood, but they're clay. But then this big one, the house is like this, and so it ended up being wood with a. So we'll see. It may not be permanent, or it's not permanent. I don't know how long it will last. So it's just on a rotation one, so it'll make it a few years through the rotations, and then I'll have to retire it or come up with a different solution. Yep.
At the risk of hoarding it, but how do you come up with the pricing?
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah, that's the worst part of Yeah. Well, so I will say one way that was super, super, super helpful for me is I took a class on it. So through Springboard for the Arts. So any artists out there, I would strongly, strongly suggest taking the class. There's a whole bunch of free classes through Springboard for the Arts. And then there's a million terrible things about COVID, but one of the good things about COVID was that now they are offering them online as well. And so you can get access to them. There's a bunch of free classes, and they'll do a pricing class. They have like they have a certain number of classes they cycle through, and so every couple of months that pricing class is available again. So anyways, I took that, and that they kind of came up with a rules somewhat to follow, but it was really helpful to come up with a calculator. So the good thing is I'm really good about keeping track of my hours and how many I spent on this project and that project, and so I can say, oh, I know I have this much materials plus this much in hours, and then plus you still need then sustainable profit on top of that so you can keep your business going, and so like I can plug all that in and then I can come up with a number. But then I don't know, with public stuff too, I'm like, I don't know, it still ends up being somewhat arbitrary. And then the biggest problem is, which you know as an artist, the biggest problem though is that like, sweet, I figured it out. So I finally got where I'm like, I feel good about the pricing for these houses because I know how much I have into them, and so that's the price for them. Well, but you always do something different, right? Because you always want to be doing different things. So then this trees project, I had in my mind of how I would build this thing, and so I could build it pretty good. I spent a lot of time on paper building it, and then when I actually went to do it, it went pretty good according to plan. It's just that it took like 5 or 6 times longer than I thought it should have. So, which the real problem was that was all right before the show was happening too. So then the first one too, anytime I make a first one, it always takes a million times longer, but still I couldn't charge 5 times as much for it, even though I spent 5 times as long. So I don't know. But I did learn from when I was teaching, because I used to be an art teacher. So then when I would come up with a project and I would want to teach my students this project, I would do a practice one, and I'd be like, okay, do the practice one. It took me 2 hours to do this practice one. And then I would present it to my students, and I'd be like, why is it taking them so long to make this? It only took me 2 hours. And then I realized because it took me, 10 years plus 2 hours, right? So whereas they're doing it their first time. And so I kind of learned it usually would take them around 5 times what it took me to make. Was a pretty standard, just almost always took them like 5 times as long. And so I realized I think that first time you're learning something, it takes at least 3 to 5 times. And so I've made a few. I think this one is called Full Sail 4. So I've made 6 of these now. Oh yeah, I have a piece in North Dakota too or South Dakota that has one of these. Anyway, sorry, distracted myself. But so by the 6th time I made this, I was super fast at it, and I made it, and I was like, I'm making a killing on this one. This one's a great profit. Whereas the first, it took me, I bet you, no joke, but I bet it took longer to make this one than it did to make the full size 6th one, right? Because I was still figuring that one out. And so, but I can't charge, obviously that one's not going to be charged 5 times as expensive as the full size one. But so I don't know. That's the class. Like I said, the class helped a ton, and I need to retake that class again now that I'm doing more of this public stuff, because likely they could help me get my pricing figured out better. But yeah, I think coming up with names is the second worst part of being an artist, the titles. But luckily my wife is awesome at that. And then, but then pricing's, that's the worst. Yeah. Or email. Yeah. I don't know. Is that it? Is there anything else should be covering?
If there's no other questions, I guess we'll just take a moment to thank you for coming all this way. I mean, you drove a couple of hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Just to be here, just to meet with all of you, and we're actually just very grateful that you
Oh,
wanted to bring these pieces here. A fun fact I learned about Jon today is that he was one of the first residents in the artist lofts upstairs in the Kaddatz Galleries.
The very first, number one.
Yes, number one. So
Yeah.
it's fun to have this reunion for you as well. So thank you so much, Jon.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yay!
So I'll just take a moment to say thanks to our sponsor again, Design and Tech Architects, just located a block down. And in addition to this exhibition, we do have Studio K. It's an exhibition of selected works from our permanent collection. Many of the artists have, gone and left us here and gone. So it's really, we're cherishing the fact that we have these works and we get to celebrate them with you. If you go tour it, you'll see some works from Robert Hislop, Otto Jaden, Olga Chell, Charles Beck, Kirk Williams, among others. So again, thank you so much for being here and enjoy the rest